Hello, welcome to CAMEO, the virtual learning series from the Arts, Media, and Entertainment Institute. April is Autism Awareness Month, and today we're discussing inclusion in the creative industries and in the AME classroom. I am so excited to center this conversation about supporting and empowering all students, including ones with disabilities, and helping them to meet their full potential in arts, media, and entertainment careers. We have some very special guests with us today, each representing advocacy and educational organizations that you definitely want to know about. Respectability, Exceptional Minds, Eye to Eye, and the Special Needs Network. We have a lot to talk about today, so I'd like to jump right in. We have Xavier Stiles from the Special Needs Network, David Siegel from Exceptional Minds, Lawan Exum from Respectability, and Shoshana Holt Oslander from Eye to Eye. Lawan, I think we're going to start with you. Could you please introduce yourself, share a bit about your career journey, and give the audience a little bit of information about Respectability?
Hello, my name is Lawan Exum, and I'm the Entertainment and News Media Director for Respectability. And what we do is we promote authentic, diverse, and inclusive portrayals within the entertainment industry. And also, we make sure that people in unmarginalized communities are represented and respected in the communities. And what I also do is help manage and support the development of our pipeline programs for our entertainment professionals, while also overseeing our consultancy on TV and film projects and building relationships within the entertainment industry, which leads me into which I've been in the entertainment industry for 31 years, and I will be 32 years in May. And I started my journey right while I was a senior getting ready to graduate from my undergrad in college. And I interned for XM Radio, which was the first streaming for Sirius XM now. And I was their first intern. And I interned as their XM jazz station producer and host. And before I graduated, they offered me the position. And I was also interning at Arista Records at the time, and I was our artist repertoire as representing and making sure when you take artists out that the journalists and reporters ask them the correct questions. And I worked with artists such as Usher, Pink, the Neptunes, and Whitney Houston. And so from there, I learned all about music industry, and I've always worked in entertainment. And from music, I started working at studios, and I worked at Sony Pictures Studio as a legal assistant and became one of their top paralegals. And I was able to work in different projects, and they gave me a project which was my footprint at Sony for doing their social media platform for Breaking Bad. So I kept working in the entertainment industry, and I went over to 20th Century Fox and worked in as a business executive and worked on projects such as This Is Us and Empire. And all through my journey, I was learning, no matter where they wanted me to go, I learned everything I needed to know within the entertainment industry, which brought me full circle to working for Respectability, because now I can be that voice for anyone who wants to get in the industry due to them having a disability or what have you. And I go into those rooms and make sure that they know that we can work as well in this industry. So that's my spiel.
I love it. 32 years in the industry, pretty impressive. Um, so we'll go from 32 years of experience to our youngest member of our panel. Shoshana Holt Oslander is an ambassador for an organization called Eye to Eye. And Shoshana, I'll let you tell a little bit about your own journey and a little bit about Eye to Eye.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like Ashley said, my name is Shoshana Holt Auslander, and when I think about my journey, I um, I really think back to middle school me, sitting in a classroom and hearing the teacher say, "It's reading time," and my heart sinking and dropping, um, and really quickly counting all of the peers next to me, the number of people who were right in front of me, so that I could then go down to my page and count the paragraphs below me, because reading was such a challenge for me. And this continued really throughout my middle school and high school educational experience. Was a lot of dread, a lot of stress, until I had the first, I got diagnosed with dyslexia at the age of 14. And that was really powerful, but also really hard for me at the time. And then shortly after, I found this amazing organization called Eye to Eye. And in this moment, after school for an hour a day or an hour a week, we would be in a classroom, and I would be paired with someone who um, who learned like me, but who was younger than me. So I served as a mentor for the middle schooler who was little middle school me, struggling, counting all of those different paragraphs. And I share this story really because that is what brought me to what I do today, why I'm an Eye to Eye ambassador, and why I really strive to advocate and be the person that I am today. I wouldn't, I don't know, I wouldn't be the person I am without this amazing organization and the advocacy that they provided for me. And this story is how I got there. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Shoshana. Xavier Stiles, you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the Special Needs Network?
No, of course. I'll do what we normally do at the Disabled Writers Committee, and also say, my name is Xavier Stiles. I am wearing silver glasses and a polka dot shirt, and I'm a black man. Yeah, my journey is I'm a writer by trade, WGA for several years now, and I think it's apparent with talking to some of our panelists so far as well that everything starts off really personal. And for me, it starts with my diagnosis. I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I have a personal fight as well in disabled inclusion. And so it was always a part of my stories. It was always a part of the characters that I wanted to portray. And I was lucky enough to gain an internship in a writer's room for a Netflix original series when I was in my final semester of college. And that started me in the writer's room assistant track, while simultaneously, like a lot of creatives who are trying to find their footing in the professional industry world, applying to a myriad of fellowships provided by ABC and Disney, which I was a finalist year, and as recent as Launchpad season 2, where my short film based off of my family's life that I wrote, Black Belts, was selected and now is currently on Disney Plus. So those programs that I've been a part of were all inclusion based, which makes a lot of sense because I've spent my time at the Special Needs Network finding we've been around for about 12 years. We're out of Watts, California. My family is from South Central LA, and we provide resources to BIPOC youth in the community. We call it holistically for autism, where we keep finding that it's not just one resource that leads to another thing, but there's a lot of things outside of clinical studies that we've learned really help. So I help find partnerships and strategies for our arts and entertainment department. We have a workforce training department as well, in programs, and a new tech facility that just was sponsored by the Amazon. So my job is to kind of blend what I do in my storytelling with what I do in my regular career life, which is mixing disability and storytelling and trying to figure out a way to remix them both to help provide some sort of positive knowledge or resource to the next generation.
Awesome. Last but certainly not least, we have David Siegel from Exceptional Minds. David, you want to share a little bit about Exceptional Minds?
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. Thank you so much for having us. As you mentioned, yeah, it's Autism Acceptance Month. I mean, for us at Exceptional Minds, where we prepare autistic young adults for careers in the entertainment industry, we're a nonprofit academy and production studio, and it's so important that Autism Acceptance Month is this month, but every day for us, we're celebrating, we're amplifying the stories and the voices that are creating this more inclusive employment culture that all of us are a part of. And as we continue, to learn as leaders working in entertainment and education, diverse voices really elevate content in super profound ways. I'm super excited to talk about all of those ways in a minute. My background, I have so much in common with all of you. Lawan, I started in the music business myself. I was managing bands in college and found my way after 3 or 4 different internships at Disney, finding my way into music and working in the soundtrack department and working on all kinds of cool movies and scoring sessions and cool soundtracks. And of course, we all know where soundtracks kind of went in the DVD business. But, from there, I went and I trained to be an agent at William Morris. So I have a very different background, and my path to nonprofit is really interesting, at least to me. But I was at William Morris and trained to be an agent, and ultimately found my way into a partnership with a movie star that I was really close to at the agency. And we started a production company and developed lots of movies. And I learned to be a producer at a very young age and had an incredible experience. My wife ended up partnering with his wife, Reese Witherspoon, and we had this whole exciting time in our 20s of putting together movies and living that experience from the creative side and the production side. And as I grew up, and one of our production deals came to term, my wife came to me one day and said, "You should really grow up and stop working in the entertainment business." And I'm like, "I can't do that. I need to be in this business in some way." And I was recruited by Disney to work in animation and fell in love with the animation process and developing animation content. And I was there in the heyday of Disney and Pixar coming together. And I worked on all kinds of cool movies, from Tinkerbell to the Disney Planes movies. And in odd fashion, and this is how I got into nonprofit, and I'll be quick, my middle son, very compassionate young kid, came to us one day, my wife and I, and said, "I have a friend with a rare disease. I want to help him." My wife and I thought we were brilliant producers and strategists, and gave him ideas like a lemonade stand and a bake sale. And he said, "You guys are crazy. I'm going to do something in content. I'm going to write a book that scales." He used none of those words because he was 6, but it's what he was intending. And that led my family on this unbelievable journey where my son's vision to create a piece of content in a book to cure a rare disease ultimately did just that. He raised close to $2 million, sold his book in 60 countries, all across the United States. And I became kind of his de facto partner and learned the ins and outs of fundraising and content marketing and change and cause marketing. And it was just extraordinary. And a couple years later, as I was back at Disney and sort of thinking about what I wanted to do next, I left the private sort of big sort of company world and went into nonprofit. And I got a call from Exceptional Minds saying they were looking for someone who had a passion for philanthropy and change, but also, understood in compassion and a desire for impact. And I met these young autistic artists and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Young folks that were working on the movies of their dreams after going through our 3-year program, or working in Nickelodeon on the animation pipeline, or doing post-production work on an Avengers movie. It was extraordinary. And I've been here almost 5 years, and I love every second of it. And being diagnosed ADHD, so being on the neurodivergent spectrum myself, if you can't tell, I am very active and very enthusiastic. I love it more than anything in the world, and our students are miracle workers, and what we do to support them and lead them onto their career pathways is just a new adventure and an extraordinary one every day.
Thanks, David. You all have such incredible personal stories that bring you to this place today and this subject that we're talking about. But I just want to say how much I appreciate you all sharing your personal stories. And I think that's what we're all here for, right? It's the importance of storytelling, and making sure that all of those stories are told in what we see on screen. So let's jump into it. David, I'm going to take this first question to you because you were just speaking. In your experience, what does inclusion look like in media and entertainment right now, and how have you seen it evolve? You said, you started at Exceptional Minds 5 years ago.
Yeah.
How has it changed since you first started?
No, I think it's a great question. I mean, even while I've been at Exceptional Minds, I've seen so much positive change. I like to call it, or I hope more people call it this as well, neurodiversity and inclusion. The conversation is so much easier to have today, even 5 years into my role, than it was 5 years ago. As workforces are embracing autistic talent, it's that sort of triple bottom line impact. It's good for everyone involved, but it's also incredibly good for business. These young adults are making a significant impact in the roles that they are inhabiting, whether that be here in our studio where they're working. It's so funny. Today I was giving a tour and I turned to two of our graduate artists who work in our studio, and they're both leads in our visual effects studio. And they've both been with Exceptional Minds for a number of years post graduation. They've also worked other places, and now they're both here full time. They, between the two of them, have like 160 credits on film and TV series that they've worked on, whether they've done post-production service work across visual effects or they've done the titles. I mean, that's what inclusion looks like in media and entertainment today. The fact that major movie studios, the Disneys and the Marvels of the world, are giving over their projects to our artists to work on. And by the way, work on in really spectacular fashion. We've done end crawls, the end titles for every Marvel film and TV series in the last 3-4 years. And that's ours exclusively to work on. And it's incredible. Xavier Romo is an incredible example. Speaking of Xavier's, he came to our organization, our school, 6-7 years ago, and commuted 2 hours a day back and forth and worked his butt off. And upon graduating, was recruited by Disney and has worked in the Marvel Studios since 2019 or 20. He's been there 5 years, and he keeps getting promoted. He keeps getting more responsibility. Kate Jorgensen, she never even graduated initially from our school when Nickelodeon called and said, she's amazing. She was an awesome intern. We want to hire her full time. They put her into a full-time position, and she worked there 4 years. Now, we were lucky enough to poach her back. So now she's one of our leads in our animation studio working here full time. So kind of it's come full circle where the student has become the teacher. She's overseeing 20 of our artists in our animation studio. So it's definitely changed even in the time that I've been here. More receptivity, more openness, and really an understanding that these artists make great impact. And that impact is felt in the bottom line, and the bottom line of their own sort of self-worth and self-advocacy, and the bottom line of the companies that they work for.
That's great. Lawan, I know you work a lot with different production companies. Like, do you want to speak a little bit to what you're seeing?
Well, I guess me telling my age, I have seen such a growth. I mean, I have to piggyback with David. I mean, it's welcoming to see that studios are accepting people with disabilities. And to me, it's right now, it's at a great time, because when I was working in the industry, I got diagnosed with ADHD. And my bosses had no clue on what to do. They was like, you're smart, you're doing this, you're doing that. And I had to explain to them, there's no label of disability. Like, it's unseen sometimes. And they were like, help me understand what is going on with you so we can help you. And that was amazing to me. So to see it come like full circle with me now, and see like people getting opportunities, it's just like, it warms my heart. Like when I get emails from people that have been in our pipeline programmers that we do each year, and they say, Lawan, because of what you told me, or the advice that Respectability gave us, I got hired. And I'm like, wow. And they said, and I also go back to what you always say when you tell us that you start out in this industry with a disability, and you taught people how to accept you for who you are, and that you could do the job just as good as somebody else. And they said, I always remember that when I go to interviews, and I thank you for that. So I just say, yeah, I see it. I see the results of, I mean, they're more authentic. I mean, you know, people are more open to tell you who they are and if they have a disability as well. So it warms my heart for me to be full circle to do what I do at Respectability.
That's great. Xavier, I thought maybe you could share a little bit. I know you work a little bit in workforce development, and I'm curious about hiring practices. And as students are trying to get into the workforce and with a disability, like, do you have any insight on how companies are being more inclusive in their hiring practices? Are there any programs that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's always incredible, by the way, just hearing, everyone's stories too, because, I think that that's the overall feeling on this side as well. It's just like there's just more visibility and there's just more urgency uh, piggybacking a bit off of Lawan and David. When I entered into my career into entertainment, I was type 1 already, but it was such a part that I never really introduced in meetings. I never really talked about it that often, unless it was something that was looking for a disabled writer. And even when I was applying to programs that are still around now, like the ABC Disney Writers Fellowship and Directors programs, which have been an amazing resource for uh, tons of diverse creatives in LA for a long time. And I'll talk a bit about that, but it's a bit because um, they've become the standard for what we in the industry call like a they're like battle tested. In order to get into the program, there is a process that involves like letters and letters of recommendation and telling your personal story, and then also having two writing samples in order to get through. But a lot of people don't know that because the entertainment industry is a bit of a family affair. I think David talked a little bit about this, but you're building relationships, and you also are building relationships with some of these diversity programs and these programs of inclusion that are looking for more diverse filmmakers and younger voices. Just over time, by submitting, they become very familiar with you. And I wasn't familiar. I didn't know that until I uh, had the privilege of meeting and starting a personal relationship with one of the talent managers at ABC at the time. That it's not just a one and done. It's like no, keep submitting every year. But simultaneously, while that process is happening, uh, she was kind enough to also let me know to like live a human life. Come back when you're in these meetings. They want to have personal experiences and they do want stories, and that you being diverse is actually going to start becoming a huge advantage. And I this was 10 years ago, where you were told that if you had a hyphenate or any other thing that wasn't one specific craft, to never let anybody know that you had a different dimension to yourself. And over time, what we've learned in now these programs really lean into your personal story, almost like some of the college essays and entrance uh, and admission requirements do. And I think that process of starting to learn the language of these programs and what they're looking for, similar to being in the nonprofit space, and learning that there is just different terminology, but there's a language and a translation that needs to occur. And I back to my own personal journey. It was so very very helpful for me to be in these programs, whether it be as a finalist or another good one is the Disruptors Fellowship, the Center for Cultural Power. They're out of downtown Los Angeles, but and they have an office in Oakland as well. But they're a large nonprofit that works a lot with disabled, non-binary. Uh, also, God, I'm forgetting the words, but a very large array of diverse filmmakers. But they have entrepreneurial cultural workshop classes, um, and I think what is interesting about those classes that come up, I think we do it like maybe 3 times a year, is they help you learn how to translate your culture into a professional work environment. And I feel like with what we do, especially the Special Needs Network, and what I try to do as a mentor to several fellows, and I'm a faculty advisor for respectability actually as well. So I have a few I have a few writers through respectability that I help and talk to. It's just about learning the language of the place you're trying to compete in and you're trying to participate in. And in the younger that we can get our youth to start just learning some of these nuances that occur just from that language, I think that is really the workforce training that will, show a lot more results over time, as opposed to simply believing that we can hop in. I think it's a bit of learning the language and the space and starting it early. So some of those, uh, I experience them, so others won't have to. But some of those growing pains won't be, for the generation coming up with us. And Special Needs Network, we see all the time that when we provide tools, we have a immersive VFX and VR and AR program with our kids, and those social disorders tend to melt away. Honestly, the moment that some adjustment to the learning process happens, that just is entertaining and exciting, and it just there's just a couple of steps that had to happen between that bridge occurs. So it's really about, I think, just figuring out that translation and finding that lexicon early.
Before we jump into our next question, does anybody else want to jump in specifically around hiring? Any advice that you would want to give young students, early career students, for getting a job, or any programs that you would like to flag for teachers? No? All right, well, let's jump into our next question. Moving from industry to the classroom, how can educators best support their neurodivergent and disabled students as they are trying to pursue these careers? In our AME pathways, teachers often have students for 3 years, from a beginning course to a capstone course. And so I'd love to hear maybe from Shoshana, seeing that you were just recently in school. What advice do you have for teachers with these students in their classrooms that they want to support?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing is don't be afraid to ask your students. I know it can seem like a really daunting and uncomfortable thing to do, but your students know what they need, oftentimes, and asking is okay. I love it when my professors are like, you know what? I know that you have dyslexia, but I don't really know what that means for this class. Can we sit down and talk about this, and what does that mean for these assignments? What does that look like for you? Because in reality, having dyslexia is a word, but that means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And so just because you have dyslexia doesn't necessarily mean you know how to address it in the classroom, as a teacher. So I would say, like, first, being willing to just ask. I would then kind of say just being willing to advocate for your students. We have to do a lot of advocating on our own, and honestly, it's exhausting. I love doing it, but it is exhausting. It's tiring. And I wouldn't be where I am today without teachers having advocated for me when I didn't see the strengths that I was bringing to the table, when they were pushing for me to, whether that was go to a reading remediation program and miss out on a little bit of school because I wasn't reading and comprehending what I needed to in school. So me sitting more in school wasn't actually going to help me. And the reason I was able to go to that program was because of one of my teachers. She said, I want Shoshana to be able to understand, and her sitting in the classroom right now is not happening. That's not happening. And so if this is going to help her do that, then that's what we need to do. So I just like advocating for your students, asking them questions. I would also say holding space and allowing them to like normalize the conversation around disability. It's a very taboo topic. One of the things that I like to do, and I didn't actually do it today, but I'll share it, is that I talk about access needs sometimes, and we like to share in at the beginning of my classes some of the access needs that we each need. And so my access need for today, I'm a little nervous, so I have a fidget with me. I like to pop it, so if you see my hands moving around, that's why. Um, but does that allow me to participate within this panel? Yes, and I can still have this conversation and still talk to you guys, but that is what I needed for today. And that might not be, that may be different for tomorrow. And so asking individuals what they might need, kind of like I said earlier, just being willing to ask, and also knowing that that might change and that that's okay, and that individuals are also still figuring it out, and that you guys can figure it out together. What I thought I needed in middle school versus what I needed in high school versus college and now in graduate school are completely different. And that's okay. I'm learning about my journey, and I'm allowing those around me to support me in that educational journey as well.
That's all super helpful, Shoshana. David, I know, you guys, you do this all the time. You're
Yeah,
supporting
yeah.
students in the classroom. What kind of insight can you share?
No, I love that. I mean, I want to address something Shoshana said too, because it's so important to sort of highlight this. We feel more comfortable today providing our sort of desire for or need for accommodations and supports. And I think that that is being embraced in ways that we haven't seen before, which is so critical. And I think what's important, just kind of going back to your last question and then circling back to this one, it's so much about the intentionality of those who are hiring folks today, whether they be on the spectrum, they're disabled, whatever it may be. They need to not just be intentional about it, they need to commit to it, and then they need to execute. And that is what's so important. And a great example of what our faculty will do with the workforce and employers of our artists, or our students, I should say, is okay. Great example. It was I can't say her name, but it was one of our third years was about to start an internship, and instead of us just sort of dropping her on the doorstep and saying, okay, good luck with student X, we'll see you in 3 months, a number of our faculty who knew her really well, got on the phone with the employer and started to share with them some of the accommodations that she has requested. They then opened up the dialogue between the student and the employer to make sure that she felt comfortable and they felt comfortable with what she would need to be successful. Because if we're simply dropping them on the doorstep, if the receiver of our talent, the employer, doesn't sort of understand where they're coming from and doesn't feel comfortable having that dialogue, then the communication falls apart. The work experience is a complete sort of disaster, and then nobody wins. So it's having these open and honest conversations, being incredibly communicative, being open, being honest, and employer education is really important. It's incumbent upon us as educators and those leading groups like all of you to work closely with employers and help them understand what it's like to work with your specific population, or with someone on the autism spectrum. We can't teach the 101 of autism to every employer, but we can give them the 101 of our students and their needs, so that they, from our experience, can see through our lens what would be a successful working arrangement. And that again goes back to the old adage of just good communication and being open and honest about it. And if you employ the same good communication you would employ with anybody, make sure you're doing it with folks who need it, and folks that are asking for support, because that support is going to make the relationship and the work experience incredibly successful.
Great. Lawan or Xavier, do you have anything you want to add to classroom supports for students?
Again, I got to piggyback on David. Communication is the key. I can't express that enough, because again, when I communicated with my manager to let them know I was diagnosed with ADHD, the communication opened up for the whole company. And they were like, what can we do not only for you, but for our other employees? And we started having mental health rooms distributed all throughout the studio. And I mean, what I did started a conversation for the whole company. And it's so crazy, because what started the communication about throughout the company was I always would call in sick. But I would call in and tell them, today I'm gonna take a mental health day. They're like, mental health day? Are you going to be sick? I was like, no, I'm not sick. I just need to take some mental health time so I can be able to give my best when I come back to work. And they brought it to my boss, and it was like, I think that's very good that Lawan calls in, say he needs some mental health. Maybe we should think about that for all the employees. So I say that to say open communication is the key. And once you do get that open communication with your employers, like for us, we have a respectability disability one-on-one that we give to different people and groups to let them be aware of the different disabilities that's seen or unseen that may be out there, that they can help them, with people who open up to them to say that I have the disability, and that can start the conversations with them. So
That's
I
amazing.
just,
That's amazing. I love to hear
yeah,
that.
I just think that's open communication is the key. And so,
So could I just piggyback off that, because I think it's so cool to hear that, because you're modeling for an organization, for that or particular organization, who may not have even, as you said, know what that was. Well, now they
yeah,
do, and you've opened up the door of opportunity for others to do that, and you're now modeling what a mental health day looks like. Others will then take those days. They will put their wellness first. You're going to get
yeah,
more productivity out of the employee. Everyone's happier. It's that modeling too. It's that communication and modeling. Once you've unlocked access to this new idea of a mental health day, wow, how
yeah.
novel, suddenly it becomes part of the culture. It's
Yes,
like
it
brilliant.
does.
It's wonderful.
It does.
Congrats.
Thank you.
I'd actually also like to piggyback on that and just say that, to your point, this is also about like celebrating how we all function differently and like all of our different needs. And so I think one of the things to also think about in supporting students in their careers is that it's really hard when you first go into your job. You have to brag about yourself. That's really hard to do. If you have only been told, especially in educational settings, you can't do this, you can't do that. Shoshana, you have dyslexia, so you can't read. But there are other strengths that I did bring to the table. Reading is really difficult for me, but I listen to audiobooks at 400 words per minute, which is quite fast if you've ever listened to anything past 200 words per minute. And so, celebrating what we each can bring to the table and helping students see what they're bringing to the table, where in certain educational settings, that may not be seen as much.
And I only wanted to, jump in just because everyone, gosh, it's such a great panel. At the at the Center for Autism, like for us at Special Needs Network, like, you'd be surprised how many large brands or programs just quite literally do want some sort of program. And, we'll talk to them and be like, we've always wanted to do something with autism. We just didn't know where to start. And, it's actually a good problem, I think, to have and compared to certain time periods as far as learning education. But there's actually a genuine energy, it feels like now, where people do want to learn and change some things.
We're coming up on time. I do want to encourage our audience, if you have questions for our panel, drop them in the Q&A or the chat quickly. We have about 5 more minutes, but I do have one. I'm trying to decide what my last question will be. I have quite a few. You all have tons of resources. Many of you have mentioned them in conversation, and we're going to gather those resources and we'll put them out in a document for all the teachers who are here and the teachers who are not here to access later. So never fear, you will have those resources. But I think the last question we should end on is, what advice do you have for your younger self starting out? The young version of you, maybe that didn't know you had a disability. What would your advice be in terms of finding success in your career path? I know that's a hard one.
I'll only jump in just because I feel like now I'm just, as I'm still considered to be a up and coming writer or whatever, like that's what they usually put. But, I'm not too far removed, it feels like, from being that young, recent grad trying to find a gig in the industry. But as a Black writer who didn't come from much financially and was disabled, like I would tell anybody, I have suffered from imposter syndrome like most, and there are several layers to imposter syndrome that I wish that I could tell myself at that time would become honestly my superpower. As far as breaking into rooms and building my career, even up until working on Percy Jackson recently, which is also a show about a kid who has a learning disability, like who's, which really fits into, what we do with special needs. But I would tell myself that, all of these things in this field, particularly in the creative industry is actually, the best tools that I have, and to lead with them and to, work on honing my craft around my own personal stories, as opposed to trying to lean towards where the industry is telling me that I need to go.
I love that. Thanks, Xavier. Anybody else?
Oh, I would have to say, I would tell my younger self, keep being your authentic self. Don't hide who you are, because you're losing. You're not taking advantage of how people will receive you. Because I was an only child, and I was that shy, creative person, believe it or not. But as I got into my career and I got older, I got more comfortable with my creative skills and who I was, being in this industry as a Black gay man. And I would tell myself, it's okay to be your authentic self. That's what I would tell my younger self.
Thank you.
It's funny. We here at Exceptional Minds, we were in a meeting the other day, and somebody on the team had just we were, I don't know what we were talking about exactly, and the context may not be important, but the words were, someone said, assume positive intent. Look at the situation, look at the opportunity, look across at the person. And we all know assume is a bad word, but it's not in this particular context. Make sure that the person you're sitting across from, you give them that benefit of the doubt. You don't make assumptions, you don't draw conclusions. You do not know what magic is going to come from that opportunity, that relationship, that chance encounter. And I think the more that we yes, live our authentic lives, and in turn look across the aisle or at the table and assume they are also living their authentic lives and their positive intention, that magic can really happen. And I think that that's really important. And as I get on in my years and do my best to grow up, that's really important to me, is don't make judgment, really like lean in and listen and ask a lot of good questions, be curious, and assume positive intent.
I think to bring it back full circle, I'm going to say something very similar to what Xavier said, that my dyslexia is my superpower. It is the reason I am the person I am today. And that while there are moments that were really, really difficult as a kid, it is why I am as driven as I am. It is why I have as much frustration tolerance as I do. And it is why I want to become the person that I want to become. I want to be the person that I wish middle school me had, to support, to follow, to look to tell it's going to be okay and you're going to do great. And so I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be the person I am today, getting a dual master's from the University of Chicago, without having gone through the difficulties that my dyslexia brought me. And that in actuality, there are a lot of strengths that my dyslexia brings me, more than the negative aspects that people like to point out or think that they're pointing out to me that aren't actually negative. I just do things differently, and it's my Shoshana way, and that's okay.
Well, I could talk to all of you much longer. I love your personal stories, and I love your passion for, supporting others. I think any middle schooler would be so lucky to have you, Shoshana, telling them it's all going to be okay. So thanks to all the teachers out there for joining us today. I hope you can go into your classroom with some new insights about how to support your students. And thanks to this wonderful group of panelists for sharing a little bit of their journey with us today. And we hope to see you all again real soon. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.